Afternoon, everybody, and we are back. That is the East and West Indies province, the Moravian churches in this area. We are back with another conversation, Courage in the Crisis. And of course, I am Billy Sterling Lewis. I'm here in Tobago. And today I have with me Chanel Gill, who is also in Tobago, Reverend Vera Waith in Barbados, and Dr. Brian in Barbados. So, guys, welcome this afternoon. And to those of you who have been joining us over the weeks, we're so happy that you have been joining us indeed. And today, moving on from what we talked about on Tuesday, we look at working from home and the stresses. We're going to a very, very important population in our homes, in our societies, and that is the elderly population and the older population. And I know at this COVID time, a lot of persons, especially elderly, may be particularly scared, may be particularly concerned, but we want to help you address some of what you're facing in this time. So I want to just bring our panel. And listen, let's do a feelings check. How are we today? Rev, how are we today? How are you today?
I am well.
Great.
Um, Life is a journey, of course, and I'm taking one step at a time, but seeking to move forward.
Excellent, excellent. Shanna, what about you? How are you today? How are you? How is your week going?
I'm good today, a bit better than I was yesterday. You know, sometimes you get these little aches and pains, and you wonder if you have COVID, and you have to take those thoughts out of your mind. But you know, I'm doing relatively okay. Thanks.
Yes, excellent. Doc, what about you?
I'm good. I had one of these days when the phone wouldn't stop ringing.
Oh, wow.
But I'm thankful and I'm good. So yeah.
Excellent. So we're starting off on a good foot. Now, let's just get into this issue with our older persons, our treasured people in society. Rob, I want to start with you. I'm sure you interact with a lot of elderly people on a regular basis through your congregation, through your community. What are you seeing happening now with our elderly persons? What are you seeing them experience, or what are they sharing with you that they're experiencing?
Well, yes, I am interacting with many older persons. And one of the things I'm seeing is that persons are having to accept the reduced or limited contact with their loved ones. And
Mhm.
that's major because it's a situation where your dearest, those you
Mhm.
love most, whose hugs and kisses and embraces you cherish,
Mhm.
they're now saying to you in some instances, you have to stay clear.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that people are coping with.
Mhm.
What used to be something that the elderly person sought after, they're now being told there's some danger in that. It can be
Yeah.
harmful. So that's a whole new adjustment
Mhm.
they have to be making, and it takes some adjusting.
Definitely. You know, folks, we're talking about the elderly and we're looking at persons 60 to about, well, 60 plus. So we have our older adults, because I know some older persons don't like to be called elderly because they're still active and moving. And then we have our elderly persons who are 75 and they're over. Um, what about you, Brian? Tell us what you're experiencing, especially through your work and your community. How are the elderly dealing with the situations at this time as well?
Well, I think for me it's perhaps more of a challenge for the people that are concerned about both the older adults and the elderly. In terms of normal life has been affected, their access to care facilities, and I mean by that going to the clinic, going to the doctor, that
Mhm.
has been affected. Going into the pharmacy, there's sometimes some challenges with that. And as Sister Vera was just referring to, in terms of persons who would normally come around and offer assistance are perhaps, being a little bit shy about that for obvious reasons. So
Mhm.
I'm seeing some gaps that are occurring in what I call care. because care is sometimes very practical, care is psychological, and care
Right.
can be medical. So you're seeing where, what's happening with COVID situation is affecting all of those aspects of what I'll call care.
Yes. And there's one thing about that, the elderly population is very diverse. Sean, I want to bring you in here. It's a very diverse population. And so their experiences, of course, will be as diverse as they are. But let us talk about some of the more specific issues that they could be experiencing. When it comes to their relationships, now, all our older people are not married. Some are still having healthy dating and romantic relationships. Some are still, as Reverend Doc said, still interacting with their families. How are these things being impacted? Just take us a little bit further with that one. And of course, if you can touch on that issue of loneliness.
All right. So I'm glad that you made a distinction for the older adults in terms of older adults, and we have that category between 60 up to 75, and then definitely 75 onwards. So for those two brackets, there are different issues that would exist, and definitely what the others are seeing in terms of that support. And so today I went out and this is something that I have been constantly seeing. And you're seeing those persons 60 and a little over with those that are 75 and older. And if you see the clinging to that need for support, because even in this time, there's a sense of fear, would I get the medication that I need? Who will stay with me? I know I might only have you for this hour, for this time. And so this might be our go to the grocery time or go to the pharmacist time. And you're definitely seeing that clinging. So loneliness is indeed there. But I mean, of course, we speak constantly about connecting, and that is important. As we get into it some more, we leave some tips in terms of how we connect and how we bridge those gaps. In terms of speaking about relationships, and of course, some persons are still very active, and not only physically active, but sexually active. And I recognize sex is not really a conversation that we hear spoken about as it concerns elderly. But when we speak elderly and we speak about active sex life, we're talking about the person 60 to 75. We're talking about that bracket, because you might find the ones a little older might not necessarily be engaging as often, or you might very well have those, because I remember being on a cruise and seeing a couple getting married at 80 and 81. So I know there's some level of intimacy there.
Yes.
One of the things that we need to touch on as it concerns these relationships, and I really want to get into that, is that, they tell you that I old, but I not old. that we have at home, old, but not old. And
Yes.
And so where you have married people who have that easy access into their homes in terms of that sexual relationship, that's okay. But then there are those persons who might not have living partners. There are those persons who might have visiting relationships, and that need for that sexual intimacy is still there. So what do we do? And then of course, you have those persons 60 to 75 still looking for love. And if you are of a Christian orientation and have the belief that if you have the belief, recognize and accept that sexual intimacy is reserved for marriage, then your challenge might be finding the one. Will I still find the one so I can fulfill that sexual part of me, so I can fulfill those desires? So as opposed to them being concerned about having an active sex life, they're more concerned about, will I be able to find that one so I can live accordingly to how God would have me to live? And then I mean, when we speak about sex and those persons with the challenge of, but I find that this is an essential service. Some will tell you that. This is the essential service in this time. What do we do? But we must always be guided wisely, because there's sexual responsibility. And I'm not just talking about physical health or medical health, but we also have to be wise in terms of abiding by the rules and regulations that we have. And so it must always be that positive note to isolate, because as much as we think that we need to fulfill, we put ourselves more at risk for other things when we go outside of that. One more thing I wanted to touch on when you spoke about some of the issues that we are seeing happening with the elderly. I think one of the things I also see coming out a lot is persons being sick. Now, remember, prior to COVID-19, persons would have been ailing with different issues. And a lot of issues seem to be on the rise. I don't know if they are brought on because of those levels of anxiety, levels of stress, levels of fear, but those issues seem to be ever more present. And, you know, we constantly praying for them to get better. And this is outside of COVID-19.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the COVID is 19 the, pandemic is really coming on pre-existing situations, pre-existing relational issues, pre-existing familial issues, pre-existing health issues, and so we really have to look out for our elderly. Listen, Doc, I want to bring you in here. As I was preparing, I was thinking about Erickson's stages of development. I love Erickson, and at this stage they are at what we call the the final stage, where they're looking at ego integrity and or despair versus despair, where they're looking back over their life. They're supposed to be sitting back looking over their lives and seeing how well they did. How do you think this COVID time is impacting their ability to really successfully reflect and move forward in this older age for them?
Yeah, but I think even starting with the older adult, I mean, and we refer to that as persons who are over 60. And
Mm-hmm.
these are persons in, you know, late stages just before they retire, who are contemplating retirement. And with retirement, one hopes that one is settled financially and socially, so that you can do certain other things, perhaps, you know, besides work, or continue working. Some people wish to continue working.
Mm-hmm.
There are those obviously who may not have achieved all they wanted to achieve in that age. And now with COVID, that's come along and has really created this, you know, such a degree of disruption, especially from a socioeconomic point of view. Then persons then have to start worrying about, you know, can I now retire? I mean, is it
Mm-hmm.
that I'm going to continue to have my job? Is it that, as we talked about, you're going to be working from home, but maybe working less hours? So in terms of setting oneself up in order to, you know, transition nicely into a retirement where you think you're in control of your time and can do all the things
Yeah.
that you want to do, COVID has now created a situation where, you know, you're now having perhaps to do a little bit of a rethink and start planning for contingencies. And actually, you're really living day in, day out, as we've talked about as well, because we're
Yes.
not quite sure what's happening. It's now harder to be as comfortable with, you know, facing the future. And if you're older, certainly, and you recognize I can't go back to work, I'm now too old, and I'm still having, you know, I'm managing perhaps with a pension, or I'm depending on family, and
Mm-hmm.
family again are having challenges in terms of their ability to support you. It's going to be a very worrying time in terms of your own subsistence and whether or not you're going to be able to manage moving forward. It can be a time of really great anxiety for persons, you know, in this age group.
You know, I'm glad you said that, because we see these advertisements for insurance companies saying to older people, take control of your retirement, take control of your older years. And they have put so much money and effort and dreams and plans into these years. And now COVID just out of the, you know, the blue has taken that level of control that they thought they had. So that is something that we really have to, you know, think of. Thanks for bringing that up. Rev, I want to bring you back in here. You know, both Chanel and Doc spoke about some of the feelings, emotions that our older persons and older adults and elderly may be experiencing now. We have one in particular, fear and anxiety, fear of death. Can you speak to some persons now who may be having those intense emotional feelings of anxiety and fear, especially fear of death, as it relates to COVID and just in general? Unmute your mic. We're not hearing you. Okay, so we're not getting Rev as yet. Rev, your mic is still muted, so you have to unmute your mic there so we can hear you.
I was saying that I missed some of what the doc was saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if I repeat anything, you will have to forgive me.
That's okay.
You were asking about fear
Yes.
of death and fear of the
Just fear
situation,
in general. Mm-hmm.
fear in general. I want to say that many persons, because the older person knows that he or she is old or elderly, very often knows that he or she has a physical, medical condition, knows that he or she is vulnerable. But over and over and over again, he or she is reminded that they are to stay away, stay at home, be careful. One of the things that I can say to you is that of all the measures put in place here in Barbados, older persons have actually called me and complained that the elderly persons seem to be getting singled out. So two persons called, and they were not seeing things as if this constant reminder of your vulnerability is meant to assist you and to protect you. But they were seeing it as if, why are you beating upon us? Why the elderly all the time? And so from that perspective, one has to be careful how you communicate with the elderly person so that it does not make him or her feel less of a person, or it does not interfere with his or her self-image, right? There's another group of persons, elderly, yes, who does not seem to be too worried. Yeah, they know what is going on, but they're just going on as before. They want to go out. They've been active over a period of time. They may be senior, but they may be working and very active, or retired, but still very active. And so they want to go out there and feel like they're alive. And that group of persons, again, they're not necessarily thinking of coronavirus as that threatening in terms of life. But yes, there is fear. There's anxiety, because every day, every hour, you're hearing of older persons losing their lives. And that is fearful. That is a matter of an anxiety for every age group, far less an age group that is being told and reminded over and over and over again. So what would I say to such a person? I would advise, especially for home and relatives and so on, don't only share the negative, morbid messages and so on. Share some of the positive ones as well. Tell of those persons who have gone through this thing and who have survived. Tell of those persons who are elderly, but in good health and still enjoying the situation with the help of others, of course. And of course, don't forget to pray. Because one thing we don't want to lose in this situation is our faith. You got to keep your faith intact.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I mean, that is also such a powerful message that even among our elderly, we have to keep our messages very positive, and we have to be careful how we speak to them, because they have to deal with so many different messages internally and externally. And you've started to breach on one thing I want both Chanel and Dr. talk about. One of two things. The issue of grief that they're experiencing. They're losing a lot, not even if they don't die, there are a lot of things that they're losing. And also, Doc, so Sean, I want you to touch on that. And Doc, I want you to talk about persons who have issues like cognitive deterioration. We have Alzheimer's. That is a big issue right now. The demented person, the persons who are dealing with dementia, almost said demented. These are issues that without COVID, they were scary for the caregivers, for the family, for the older persons themselves. What's happening now with these issues in the COVID environment? Let me start with you, Doc, and then Chanel, because that comes out a little bit with the grief. shall we talk about the grief? Doc, can you help us understand on how we can handle this Alzheimer's and other medical issues that the elderly are dealing with?
Okay, well, as you've talked about, dementia is also nowadays known as neurocognitive disorder. As the name implies, cognition is about thinking, it's about how we process, it's about our memory, it's about orientation, knowing where we are, knowing who we are, knowing who other people are, especially important people in our lives. So if you have someone, and again, dementia is usually a condition that affects, I would say, older persons, and certainly when we're talking about 60 and over, it will affect persons in that age group. And the issue is really whether or not one recognizes within oneself that this is happening, that you are forgetting things. And we all have these, what we call senior moments, where we forget something, but then usually, you remember and you go along. But then sometimes you become very much aware that something more than that is happening, and you are losing sets of your memory, and your thinking is not what it used to be. And that can be very distressing, certainly. And we're talking about even before COVID now. So yes, that can be very distressing for such an individual who's recognizing that they're not as sharp as they used to be from a mental standpoint. And of course, well, as you progress certainly into a fuller set of dementia, then again, then it's often observed by your family, and then your family members usually are ones who then end up having to, again, be helping you and helping you to do daily tasks, helping you in your financial affairs, helping you do sometimes very practical and very simple things like combing your hair and putting on clothes. So when that happens, then it becomes very difficult for family members. If memory goes and persons start to not be able to recognize, persons around them. So you have a child who recognizes that their mother or their father no longer recognizes them, doesn't know who they are, and it's almost like a stranger. Then it's very difficult, and it's a very difficult emotional situation for that child or that relative. So you have the physical task sometimes of caring for people, as I'm saying, maybe you have to attend to their hygiene and so on. But also you are watching someone that you've grown up with, that you know and you love, who is becoming for you, they're becoming estranged from you because they're not recognizing you, they're not responding to you in the same way that you would have built up as in a relationship through all of the years. So difficult often, again, for both persons who are being affected by this, difficult for the caregivers, and then obviously you throw COVID on top of this now with all of its concerns with regards to, death and mortality, and you create really very difficult emotional experiences for persons.
Right. What are some of the losses, Chanel, that our elderly persons are facing right now, and how can they deal with it? What do they do?
All right, so they have a lot of losses that are happening, and as Rev spoke, and she spoke about there are a group of elderly persons feeling like they could just continue to do the stuff that they're accustomed doing. So we have loss of routine. So even though they have that portion that might feel like, I can still do what I need to do, I go in and die anyhow. Was it different? There's that loss of routine, the things that I accustomed to when I get up at 7 o'clock, I walk down the road to buy a newspaper, I drink a cup of tea, I sit down in the veranda and I speak to my next door neighbors. And so there's that loss of routine. There's also that loss of free movement. I can't self-care the way that I would like to anyhow, because sometimes our elderly and older adults self-care better than we do, and they understand the need for balance better than we do. And so loss of free movement to do that. There's also the loss of community service, which could be linked to the loss of self-identity, because a lot of elderly persons are so active in the community. A lot of elderly persons take persons into their homes and care for them because they recognize they may have had a bad break, they may not have had the right upbringing, and so they bring them into their fold, and they have that loss of community service. And so when they have that loss, it's like, what is my purpose again? What am I here for, And then, of course, there's the loss of church involvement. A lot of elderly people and older adults are heavily involved in church, and church gives them that sense of purpose, just to be able to out there, go to church, call wherever you want. I need to bring this for you. But no, we social distancing, we isolating, and there's no need to ask Rev if I could bring this for you because it's supposed to be at home. And so there's that loss. There's also the loss of accessing the right medication. because due to COVID-19, certain medications you might not have in stock, and as you get it, you might have to buy up in bulk. But now what they're doing, because they're seeing that certain things are constant, they're limiting people to a certain amount. So then there's that loss of the accessing what they're accustomed using, and they might have to settle for something else. Of course, we talk about loss of sexual intimacy in some cases, because for everybody, that's not necessarily the case. So those are just a few of the losses in terms of grief, because, you know, grief and loss don't just speak to death, but it speaks to loss in general.
In general, you know, and I want to add to that there, and let me have touch on it to start. You know, this issue of the losing, yes, but there's a financial aspect that generally takes place with our older people, where the caregivers, sometimes the family members, whether they're the main caregivers or not, have been abusing or tend to abuse our elderly people. I know of many cases where children have been beating their parents, or taking all their pension money and splurging and giving the parents bread and water, you know, even literally. um, how can Rev, how can older persons get help, or can deal with any sort of abuse they may find themselves facing at this time? I know we talk about domestic violence, but our older persons are in that category as well, in that domestic violence cycle.
Okay. Um, just a bit in terms of loss.
Mm-hmm.
A very simple loss would be a journey to the supermarket,
Yes.
to meet up with old friends, a
Mm-hmm.
journey to the post office, or to collect your pension,
Mm-hmm.
to do a little gossiping in a good way,
Yes.
you know, to catch up on the
Catch up.
news. Um, so, so these are things that persons are processing, they're going through, they're affecting them. And then if you then have to depend on someone or some persons who take the opportunity to abuse the situation, things that you no longer can do for yourself or are allowed to do for yourself. You would love to do these things for yourself and to maintain your routine, but because of the situation, you can't. Now, you then have to try to engage some trusted person. You have to speak out.
Yes.
I spoke to someone recently whose family member, they're accustomed to getting into arguments, but this time around, the family member laid hands on this person. And I said to her, you have to do something about it. When it reaches that stage, I mean, abuse is abuse, but when it reaches the stage where somebody's going to lay their hands on you because you speak out in your own defense, because you want justice and you know that you're being taken advantage of, and because you speak out, that person or persons want to, then I said, look, you have to do something about it. Call the police. Pure and simple. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. Okay.
well, I just wanted to add to that. We're going down in time. You know, the stress level is so high for everybody in the family. And if there are financial stresses because loss of work, or just the amount of responsibilities now other family members have to take on, we see that now poor coping mechanisms can really affect the interactions. That example you gave is not a common one, but it's such an important one, because as stress escalates in the family, we could see people using different means to try to cope and control and manage even our elderly population. You want to share something else? We have a few more minutes. You're sharing something else? Rev? I'm not sure if I don't think she's hearing me at this point. Are you hearing me?
Hello? Can you repeat for me?
No, I was asking if you were sharing something else.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, right. So let's just touch in this issue of technology. Our older persons, our old elderly and older adults are in a new era where we now have to communicate, connect, interact through technology. And many of them before would have scoffed at it or just said, "Nah, I'm too old for this. I'm scared." You know, a lot of older persons are afraid actually of technology. How can we encourage them to now see it as a friend, as a partner? As a matter of fact, now it's a necessity. How can we get into that place of comfort that they would reach out and hold technology by the hand? Let's see, Doc, Shernal, any of you could just jump in on this one.
Okay, so in terms of the technology, you definitely hit the nail on the head when you say some of them may be scared to use it because some of them do have that kind of anxiety about what do I do with this? What's the purpose of this? They don't quite get it. And so
Yes.
this time where persons are feeling that sense of loneliness, technology definitely can be a friend in the sense that we help them to understand how to use it. We help them to
Mm-hmm.
understand how to use it, and we also give them practical experience. So some persons were speaking about having play dates with the grandchildren. So for a little half an hour, you put on the phone, let the grandchildren know, look, granny is on or granddad is on, and they sit down and they interact, having that video conversation with the grandparents. Also, you
Mm-hmm.
can allow them to FaceTime their other elderly friends and keep that connection going. And so they don't have to walk over by the shop to buy a newspaper. They can easily FaceTime and find out what's going on in the community as well, because now we're speaking about changing routines. And so this is part of it, how technology comes in there. As well, in terms of keeping in contact with close family members, you always have that ready connection with the technology, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Facebook. You know, some of them might just want to reach out to say hi. Some of them might just want to be able to stay informed with what is happening. And so technology really comes in there and saves the day. And we have Mother's Day coming up on May 10th. And so we're going
Yes.
to notice exactly all the creative things that people are going to do in terms of using social media to really send a happy Mother's Day message.
Excellent, excellent. We are winding down. I just want to just talk a little bit, bring the information together. You know, in on the TV, the news, we're seeing a lot of people going to the homes and speaking to persons, the elderly, to the screens. You know, touching hands and trying to make that connection the best way they can. And we've been saying that repeatedly to this program on different topics, that connection is such an important part. We have to connect with God. We have to connect with ourselves. We have to connect with each other. Brian, Doc, is there anything you want to just, as we tie up this afternoon, leave with our older persons, and not just our older persons, but those who are interacting with them on a regular basis to help our elderly and older persons get through this time?
I just want to, I think, speak about connection as you refer to.
Mm-hmm.
Just finished speaking about the technology and using technology in terms of connecting, because I think it's a great way for older people and younger people to connect. In terms of the younger persons, invariably showing the older persons how that is done. So I think that that's really quite key. And connection occurs even when we're doing things, whether or not it's, you know, reaching out and bringing meals, or we're assisting an older person in terms of tidying around the house or whatever. There's a fear about necessarily getting close and getting within that 6 feet and all of that. But there are creative ways in which we can connect. Technology is not the only way. And it's important. Older persons are used to reaching out and touching, and we still have to find ways of connecting. It is a necessity for us as individuals, and certainly I think it is important for the older persons as well. And we talked about faith as well, and important as well that we always remember that, and we work, even using technology, to pray with the older persons, assisting them in reading the Bible or whatever. You know, if you have to be doing it through a screen, finding ways in which to do some of the things that they enjoy doing, they're accustomed to doing, and things that they've done all their life, which have kept them well.
Yeah, excellent. And I was just gonna ask Rev just to wrap up with us on that issue of faith. How can they experience their faith in this new time, in this new era, COVID era that we're in? What can you say to them at this point? They can't go to church anymore, and they love their church, they love their soup kitchens, they love their, women's meetings and men's meetings, but they can't have that now. They feel that sitting in the pew gives them a greater connection to God, but they have to sit on their couch now. How do we help them to remain grounded and connected with God at this time, Rev?
I think that all of us, of whatever age, family, friends, church sisters and brothers, need to communicate. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Give support, care, protect. When you spoke about the technology, I smiled because I guess among the older persons. So I had to learn, and I'm learning myself so I can understand how older persons feel at this time, because it's a new learning they have to go through. But for me, the key is to communicate, to ensure that persons are comfortable, that they have what they need, that we go to our way to try to make contact, to talk to persons each day, and that we encourage persons always that the same God who has brought them to this point will take them through, and that we will emerge from this situation.
Yeah.
And it is my prayer, and I want to share this with everybody, that we pray and we act now that post this thing, we will be a more loving, a more caring, a more resilient,
Yes.
and that we will be a persons who pay more attention to healthy living.
Yes.
The wholeness, physical wholeness, but our spirituality.
Excellent.
So that when we have come next time, I hope there's nothing else like this, but should a situation like this arise, we will have within us the spiritual resources to help take us through. But I know we will emerge from this situation, God being our help.
Excellent. I love that. I love that. And you know, we heard of a situation, I think it was in Paris, or not Paris, Italy, where one older lady had to just said to them, you know, I've already lived my life, give the ventilator to somebody else. And I think she died a day or two after. And I'm sure there are many other stories like this that may be happening or have happened around the world. And sometimes our older people and elderly may feel, you know what, well, my life is done. Unless God has said that for you, I want to encourage our older people to continue to live the best and the fullest life that they can, even in this situation. So like Rev said, and Doc and Shana said, learn something new, whether it's a technology, learn a song, go read the stories to the grandchildren via Zoom or WhatsApp or FaceTime, you know, to stay ahead of the situation and stay encouraged. We just want to reinforce that issue of communicating and asking for help. Listen, I know older persons sometimes don't want to ask anybody for help, but this is a time where it's okay. Ask for help if you need help. And I want to say to our community, our families, our church members, that we too have a responsibility to be keen, look out, see if something is different. I have older friends I visit regularly, and I mean, I had to say, I can't come by you now, you know, it was really hard. That's my getaway when I want to get away from the children. I go back and say, I'm coming by you. And we sit down and chat and we do recipes. And, you know, she laughs. She says, yes, you can't come. But we call and check up every time just to make sure everything is okay. In this time, we are going to make it. Rev mentioned that word resilience. We are resilient. We have so many things working for us. And so for our community, the Moravian community, our friends and our partners around the Caribbean and around the world, we want to say to you, stay connected, stay safe, because at the end of it, we will get through this. Guys, we are out of time. We went a little over time, but I think we did a good job touching on some of these issues that affect our elderly and our older adults. And so at this time, we're going to wrap up, but we're going to be back next week. We're actually winding down. We have just about 2-3 more topics to touch on. And we want to hear from you. So you can send us a message to the Calvary Moravian Church Facebook or YouTube channels and pages. You can send one of us who are a part of the group that you've been seeing around over the weeks messages, and we will get your information, your topics, your ideas out there. But until then, until next week, Tuesday, when we're back again with another session or conversation of courage in the crisis, we want to say stay safe, stay blessed, and stay well. Take care and God bless you.
Bye.
Bye.